All right, it is 4:30. I will call this policy committee meeting of the Germantown School District to order. Item 2, roll call. Bob Soderberg
I'm here.
and Russ Ewert.
Here.
Committee is present. Item 3, agenda revisions and approval.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Bob, second by Russ. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Item 4, minutes. Item A, approval of February 21st meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the February 21st, 2023 meeting minutes.
And I'll second that.
Motion by Russ, second by Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. All right, item 5, new business. Item A, discussion and action regarding updates and modifications to district policies 0100 through 9800.01. Dr.
Thank you.
Ewert, please.
We have 30 plus policies to review tonight with recommendations from Neola and their legal team, as well as a few policies with recommendations from the district administration team for the committee to take to the full board. So we'll start with policy 0100 definitions. New definitions have been added for the terms legal notice and official newspaper, and those terms may be referenced in various policies throughout our policy manual. This revision is recommended for updated reference.
I don't have any concerns with the updates here.
Nope.
No, neither do I.
Okay.
I
Let's move
will
on.
reference, actually I'll get to it. One second. If you do look in a future policy, I would just ask you now to read on page 3 the definition of parent. Parent refers to not only natural or adoptive parents, but court-designated legal guardian, custodian, and surrogate of a student. That definition will come into play in a future policy instead of coming back
Back to
to read
this.
that, so that you have that definition in mind.
All right, so noted. Thank you. I think 0155 committees is next.
Yes, this is a policy that I'm bringing recommendations for revision. We have currently 6 standing committees with the advent of the Teaching and Learning Committee last spring. And letter F under operating procedures, I've added a definition for the committee to review regarding the Teaching and Learning Committee.
Mr. Ewert, as the chair of that committee, any concerns?
No, it looks like it should, I believe.
Okay.
The addition of it is needed, so.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, certainly should be a standing committee.
I have no issue. I do have a rather stupid question on B, Personnel Committee. The word personnel is rather dated in today's in current time. Are we bound by law to keep it like that, personnel? Or can we call it human resources or?
I think that the title doesn't matter.
Just
It's the
semantics,
task of it.
Yeah.
That's something we can look into and revisit maybe
Yeah,
next go
it's just
around.
It's just rather dated.
Sure.
I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, to that point, Bob, where I work, we don't have human resources anymore. We have the people office.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, things certainly change.
Yep. Cool. Thank you.
All right, I think 0163 is next.
This is a policy that I'm bringing forth for consideration for revisions. The policy would add that in the absence of the president, vice president, and the clerk, the treasurer shall preside if we do have quorum for a board meeting. Just last month, the president and vice president were unable to attend, which it fell to Mr. Barney, but if he were not to come to the meeting, then we wouldn't have had a chair of it. We would have to nominate this way. It kind of goes chain of command for those assigned positions.
Right. And I think treasurer makes sense. That's the next, or the remaining officer position. All right. Next one would be 0166.1, consent agenda.
Yes, we have a policy around consent agenda and utilizing that within our board agendas to approve an overall consent agenda for operational items. The language, though, only stated for payment of vouchers and donations. I'm requesting that We modify that policy to do one swoop during regular board meetings to approve a consent agenda related to not only payments and of vouchers and donations, but regular board meeting minutes, certified staff contracts, certified staff resignations, and certified retirements. This would not mean that we wouldn't include the full detail of report in this portion. It just would mean that we wouldn't read everything out loud. If board members had questions about items in the consent agenda, the proper administrator or board member would speak to that. But many school districts have a portion of their board agenda that's consent, and there's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second, any discussion, and then it's passed. This way, you think about our last board meeting, we had many things in new business that were very operational. This just would be used for timeliness, but it would still keep the transparency of full reports, just like we have in new business, itemizing out, whether it's a new teacher contract, anything like that, just for flow of board meetings. Actually, Arrowhead Board just had this conversation and passed resolution to change policy to include a consent agenda. I think the village does that in their agendas as well.
So you would provide the data in the board packet, but when it comes when the agenda does come up, you wouldn't do a report out?
Correct.
'Cause I think we should recognize our staff retirements, our teachers that retire, and recognize them. I would just hate to have that slip through the cracks.
And it could be to the point that, Mr. Nowak's not reading a full report to you, but we motion to approve the consent agenda. A board member might say, I'd like to recognize
Okay.
these retirees in the consent agenda,
Right.
or welcome our new hires in that respect.
How would contract concerns play out in that? If we're bringing in multiple new staff, but there might be a concern on potentially one or a couple, and we want to discuss that further.
The discussion could still come in the consent, and then there could be a modification to approve the consent agenda.
So it'd be a
regarding
motion, a second, and then discussion.
Yep, and then it
Or-
might be a modification, approve all new contracts with the exception of.
We're not losing an opportunity to have discussion.
No.
That's okay.
If you don't have any concerns, I would see that you would have a motion and a second for the consent agenda, maybe some discussion, and then it would be approved. But let's just say these are our agenda items, A through F as listed here. Someone could make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D. You go through, get a second, approve those, and then you have
And then go back
maybe
to-
additional discussion on items E and F.
Okay.
Le-
Go ahead, sorry.
Last month, there was multiple travel requests. Could travel requests be something that's included in these, or do you want those separated for?
They could.
one reason?
I did not include those, and that's a great point to bring up because there often is a lot of discussion related to that, which then kind of takes away from the purpose of the consent agenda process. I looked at multiple districts in the CC1 region, and these were the main categories that districts that utilize consent agenda had included.
I just hope that when I'm gone, that the board has a practice of always calling out and thanking staff retirements. I really don't care about resignations, because someone's going to another location, that's fine. I'm happy for that person. But for retirement, 20-plus years.
Sure.
And also for donations. Our donations are very significant. And not to highlight them and recognize them and thank them in open session, I think would be wrong. So, just a thought.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
All right.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Does it prohibit us from discussing it or highlighting those things like you were saying? So, my question: this is a recommendation coming from you, not Neola, correct?
Correct.
This formatting.
Correct. And this would, if it's obviously approved to full board, wouldn't take place till April, our agenda, construction. This would come after community comment, the consent agenda approval.
Okay.
So this will be voted on Monday. And then for the next board meeting, it'll be in effect.
Correct.
Got it.
So there'd be a restructuring of what our agenda outline looks like.
All right. I think we can move on.
I think so, yeah.
Item 0175, association memberships. I think that's
Yes,
the
this
next one.
revision adds an additional membership option for the board. This is coming up, Neola recommended adding it. Doesn't mean we have to join the association, any of these associations, but this is another association that has come up across the United States that some school boards in certain regions of the country are engaging in.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns. It's the board may maintain memberships in these, not that we will.
WIR.
And we did take action against the National School Board Association, didn't we? Because of what they did with DOJ? Last year, was it?
I don't have knowledge of that. I don't.
Didn't we do that?
Yeah, I don't recall what the action might have been.
That or the Wisconsin board.
It wasn't Wisconsin.
WASB removed themselves from.
That's right. Because I don't think we're a
National.
member of the National School Board Association.
Correct.
WSB is. That's what it was.
Yep.
Okay.
And in the last year, I believe the Consortium of State School Board Association has become a new association that school
Is that-
districts are engaging in.
So that's outside of WASB,
Correct.
but it's
The Neola's recommendation was to add it because, to Mr. Barney's point, we may or may not, but at least it's in there if down the road we wanted to affiliate with that association. It opens the door for the possibility.
okay.
All right. Think we can move on?
Mhm.
Believe 2220.
Yeah,
Sorry, 2210 maybe.
Yes, curriculum development. This policy is revised to more closely align with DPI regulations pertaining to curriculum development and content, as well as reference to review process. The policy also incorporates reference to innovative instructional design concepts and cross-references to innovative instructional program policy. The adoption is recommended to incorporate more detailed language provided in applicable regulations and to the reference applicable legal citations. These are Neola's recommendations.
I guess the question I have is, and maybe it's just the wording, if we go to page 2, we use just J as an example to start with. In elementary grades, provide regular instruction in reading, language arts, social studies, and so on. So we are going to provide those the items. Well, if you look at L, provide regular instruction in foreign language in grades 7 through 8. Are we saying that it's a mandatory kids have to take a foreign language in grades 7 and 8? Using provide, we are going to give the student that instruction.
Yeah, and currently all kids do take world language or foreign language in 7 and 8. Or, I'm sorry, they do not.
They do not.
So provide would mean we provide like
Make
an
available.
opportunity.
We make it offer.
If we mandate would be,
Right, but I'm just comparing that to provide regular instruction in reading, language arts, social
Sure.
studies,
Yeah.
mathematics. It's mandatory in those
Sure.
cases. That's part of their standard curriculum.
so provide opportunity for regular.
Or use K as a perfect example. In grades 9 through 12, provide access to an educational program.
That's what L
That might
mimic K.
clear.
Yeah, I
L,
like that.
L, yeah.
Yeah. It's
Right.
the opportunity
Provide
there
access
if
to-
you choose, yep. So we
Right.
utilize the language in K, provide access to,
Obviously, I and J, the kids are doing those things. Yeah.
I think just to provide the clarification.
agree.
Other than that, I didn't have concerns with
So,
the policy.
going back to page 1, third paragraph, the board directs that the curriculum shall be developed and evaluated by the district administrator, and the curriculum plans and courses of study incorporated into the curriculum of the district. So that's new language. I'm assuming it just read the board directs that the curriculum of this district, and then the following. So what's the purpose of highlighting that, and where does it leave the board and the teaching and learning committee in the process?
So I think that gets into a future policy we'll be looking at this evening when it comes to curriculum review process that's been outlined, and then the review team and the process of adding, changing, modifying courses, and then the board's final approval of that. I look at this policy as broader and going in, and then the policy we'll be reviewing later when it comes to the adoption of course study.
How it's done.
Correct, is the
Ensuring
more
that it's done.
granular. Yep.
Okay.
This is the policy of that we have development of curriculum over time. The next one that we'll review later is related to the more granular, stakeholders' role in
Yep.
that.
Now, for me, I am far from an English major. It just doesn't read well to me, starting with and that curriculum plans and courses of study incorporated into the curriculum of this district.
You're in the first paragraph.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
Mr. Ewert just pointed out.
Yeah. When I initially read it a couple times, I mean, I eventually got what was going on there, but I tripped over the wording myself a couple times.
Right. Yeah, I think it's probably okay. Just I don't know.
I can reference back with
Could've been
Neola.
better.
This is
In the end, you're saying all these curriculum plans must do the following, and then A through
correct.
Q.
Correct.
It's probably a simpler way to say it, but
Yeah,
that's Neola language.
we
Yep,
pay
it's
we
their
pay them
lawyers.
we pay them
okay.
for the service, so they
Yeah, they're
they
able-
feel like they need to justify the payment that they're getting.
They could
Yeah, exactly.
translate
More
it-
words, right?
translate it to Latin.
Yeah, this is their legal team's review of the language. So
Okay. We can move on. 2220?
So perfect segue to adoption of course study, as we were just talking about. There are modifications here, and this policy has been revised to in coordination with the previous policy we just talked about, 2110, to better reflect DPI regulations, PI 801 2K2 and PI 801 sub 2K3. The revisions are recommended. Mr. Miziak and I utilized some of Neola's recommendations, but their discussion with their team were really related to what locally we wanted to do related to this, that our policy was somewhat outdated. And we took the work that we have been sharing through the Teaching and Learning Committee going back to last spring, through the curriculum review process, our schedule for curriculum review, how we structured review teams, and how we've shared information with the Teaching and Learning Committee, and the pilot work to outline how to develop, what to eliminate from this policy, and then what to add related to the work that's currently being done in Germantown. So I figured this one would be one that to talk through in depth. There's some deletions of past practice, but we've tried to make it mirror the current practice and the practice that administration and the advice from Teaching and Learning Committee would be to move forward with adoption of courses of study, as well as revisions and deletions over time as well. So some terms have changed from steering committee to review team. I will point out that on page 4, the instructional improvement council piece that had been in place previously was deleted. We felt that was would be okay because we do have now a standing committee that reviews curriculum, talks about curriculum, that's transparent to the community through our committee meetings. And when time is needed in certain coursework, we would include on review teams parents if need be.
Let's say on page 2, I like the verbiage change from content to class standards and objectives, which is constantly what we're talking about in the Teaching and Learning Committee, prioritizing them and meeting those objectives. I like a lot of the mirroring of the conversations we've had seem to come through on this pretty well. I would agree with the deletion that you had just mentioned, because we are doing it out in a open meeting format, versus this gave a process for it, but it wasn't in open before. So I think that's a helpful, transparent add to the board.
We also talked about let's see, this would be page 1, 2, page 6, process for course program addition, revision, or deletion, laying out the pieces that obviously ultimately the board's final authority of approval for both new work and dropping of courses or closing out of courses, and then the revision process and what that looks like. And annually, the Teaching and Learning Department will post the curriculum review process and curriculum calendar to our district website so that community, anyone that clicks on our website knows what areas are in review, what areas are in implementation, and what future content areas would be up for review as well. So it's not a year to year, what's next.
I'm gonna back up to page 2. First paragraph, last sentence. Deviation from its class standards and objectives must be approved in accordance with the district administrator's administrative guidelines. I don't think the word "its" is needed there. Just deviation from class standards
Yep.
and objective must be approved in accordance with
Yeah.
administrative guidelines.
You sure you weren't an English major?
No,
Tom?
not. Definitely not. That's all I had for that one. Committee, anything else for 22? All right, 2220.
I did not.
Okay, and that would take us to 2221.
Yes, this policy has been revised to align with the state law that specifies September 11th as a special observance day, as well as certain provisions for Arbor Day. These are recommendations per state statute. You'll see that this Friday is the Great Hunger Day, and we have our principals read on their announcements on given day. DPI has for each day, a paragraph that talks about this observance and why it's important. So that's the addition of September 11th, which makes sense to have as a special observance day.
All right, I have no concerns with or questions on that one. Seeing none?
Nope.
All right, policy 2430, I believe, is next.
Yes, this is the policy for district-sponsored clubs and activities. This policy has been updated to include language permitting the use of the district logo and other intellectual property when in compliance with the policy in order to be consistent with the current guidelines is recommended for internal consistency when it comes to district-sponsored clubs and activities. So if
Yeah,
we
to
are,
me, it makes sense if they're
we are sponsoring it, right?
right. If we are sponsoring it, there's no reason for them to not to use the name or logo.
Right, it shouldn't be the Menominee Falls, whatever club or team.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Especially from a branding standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first of a couple on this subject, tobacco and nicotine. First one's policy 3215.
Yes, both of the policies, the same edits or revisions have been added to specifically prohibit smoking as intended and to reference marijuana and hemp derivatives within the context of smoking. This is provided to give districts more authority to control the use of these partially legal products that are nonetheless used as mood-altering substances impacting students at schools. So it's recommended for revisions for consistency to improve the influence of substances out of our schools. You'll see there's many THC new things that have come out since the last revision on the policy.
Yeah, I think it's good to add that clarity.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have to stay on top of too, because stuff is altered so fast. It's hard to keep ahead of that curve.
Yeah, Neola said this might be something that comes back annually.
Yeah, terminology, chemical alterations, it's a nightmare to deal with.
All right. I think the same changes are in 4215, which just then applies to support staff. So if we move on, that would take us to 5200, attendance.
So this policy is revised to incorporate definitions of key terms for both the purposes of this policy. These definitions are required in order to enforce truancy requirements and potentially enforce open enrollment termination provisions in the context of habitual truancy. It's strongly recommended from Neola to go forward with these recommendations.
It's is it page 2? Looks like you're adding the in writing.
Hmm.
So it'll be the student has been excused in writing by their parent before the absence for any or no reason. Currently, they can just make a phone call and do that, I'm assuming?
Yes, and so the verification of that is the parent writing gives you a little more concrete.
Okay. Tightens things up for
Yep.
for us administratively.
Correct. Versus someone pretending to be someone on the phone.
Yep.
I know that other districts have had that in place before as well.
So, to continue in that same section, one possible reason could be medical, dental, or legal. That's item 1.
Mhm.
In the past, you maybe go to your appointment, get a note from the doctor, bring that with. Well, this says it needs to be in writing before the absence. The very first sentence, the student has been excused in writing by their parent before the absence. Do we need to stick with before the absence, or can we accept?
That's by parents. So if I'm taking my child to the dentist, I'm saying Tom's not going to be here first through second hour. We're going to the dentist.
Right.
If I go to the dentist and I get that fun print off they give you that Tom was at the dentist from this time to this time, we bring that back, it washes.
Okay.
So the writing is the parent notifying my child will not be in school. Then a dentist, an orthodontist, medical, they print usually legal, something legal. They'll give you kind of the pass card back.
All right.
I think, but you're asking, does the parent have to provide the in writing prior to the appointment?
Right. Could I call and say my student's leaving for an appointment at 10, my high schooler that drives, and they come back with an excuse from the doctor? I guess that wouldn't meet this policy.
They would be
then.
unexcused until we got the medical documentation. This way we're saying they are actually excused from school and they're not truant because the parent wrote in. I mean, we could eliminate the writing piece out. It's a matter, it gets sticky when they didn't go to the doctor, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, as I say, I think the in writing makes sense when we're talking about a alternative spring break or trip the family's taking, right? That's easy to write in ahead of time. But-
Mhm. An
and
extended
what
vacation.
you're saying is we got a doctor's appointment that comes up, and I'm calling to let you know my kid needs to leave,
Right.
but he would return with this medical.
Yep. They would just be marked as unexcused until they came back.
So you get the
What if the
Excuse from the
parent
doctor.
does it in writing, but they don't come back with that medical?
Then it would be a parent excused absence, not a medically excused. So it would count towards their 10 days. Without the medical documentation or legal,
Yeah, that's what gets it off the
that's
10
what
days. Yeah.
that does. Yeah, that's what scrubs it clean.
So
So-
I could show up.
Or any of these.
Regardless of if it's a parent prior notification.
Correct.
I could just show up at the school office and say I need to take Johnny out of class for a doctor's appointment. Do I still have to write?
I think
Right.
that in that case you're face to face, right? That
Okay.
because you have to sign your child out. You could say,
Right.
Johnny, medical appointment.
That's
That's in
right,
writing,
yeah.
and then
Okay.
they come back with the coupon that says that you were there.
So I'm just curious, how does Johnny get out of that classroom? Let's say Johnny's in 11th or 12th grade. Does Johnny notify the teacher that I've got an appointment, I've got to leave here at
That's why
1:30?
the writing is good, because then the attendance office will notify the teacher
Got
that
it.
Johnny can leave at
Okay.
1 o'clock today for a medical
It could be
appointment
as-
and walk down.
It could be as simple as an email, right?
Yeah, that's writing. Yep.
Got it.
It's a
Okay.
kid, teacher, whatever's all.
Is
included.
this very close to current practice? Or are we saying we get way too many phone calls for absences and now we need to document it?
I think it depends from level to level, right?
Okay.
Elementary parents are much more prompt. I get, though, when you have a high school student and all of a sudden the orthodontist is available now,
Right.
but they're coming back then with the
I was going to say, my other question, similar to that, would be, are we seeing instances of excuses being provided post issues reaching past those 10 days. And, I called them in, or I meant to call them in. Well, we need that in writing.
Yeah, I think that always happens where, they were gone those 3 days because they're at a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Well, you have to backlog those doctor's
Yeah.
appointment.
I'm thinking more in the area of a chronic absentee
Yeah.
or truant
Yep.
issue, and a parent potentially trying to assist with recovering some of those days for a disciplinary issue.
So they don't get cited for truancy or
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
My child's been sick. Well, then you may have provided that in writing or emailed or called, but there's no backlog of the. If they're out 3 days, you probably should have brought them to the doctor. Verified.
Might be worth, assuming we leave this in here, recommend it to the board, it passes at the board. Maybe get some clarity out to our parents on expectations of excused absences,
Yeah. Yep.
and definitely point out before the absence is how the policy is.
Yep.
Because I could think of personally, we had a child that had some illness issues. We were getting those doctors, but it was the beforehand, and it became so many days they needed to go out for certain testing. And then afterwards, towards the end of the year, hey, your kid's been, you need to go back and get
All these
X, Y, and
notes.
Z.
Yeah.
The district could do a better job of intervening in the front end of that, especially when there's a known ongoing issue.
Yeah, we have worked internally this year to tighten up around the current existing policy, our 5-day and 10-day notifications to parents, specifically at the elementary level where it's attendance is huge at the middle and high, but cleaning that up.
Goes with the improved communication we're all working on, right?
Exactly.
All right. Good with the other changes in this policy?
The others around definitions.
So are these drastic changes from what was there before? Because I can't see what was, or are we adding these? Because
We're
nothing's
add-
red.
We
there's
are
no red.
adding the definitions to policy because I believe they were only in administrative guidelines prior. This way it clearly outlines truancy, habitual, and part of a school day.
I appreciate that.
Hence the big green box.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that was my question. Are these new definitions
Yeah.
reworded or what? Because I
They're,
didn't see
they're the
anything
terms in
removed.
statute. They just were, I believe,
we just
only in
didn't have-
guidelines.
Okay.
And most people don't look at the guidelines, which understandably.
All right. If there's nothing further on that, we'll move forward to 5250. Program or curriculum modifications.
This new policy provides the process specified by the state statute for program or curriculum modifications for students in circumstances that require more than a routine schedule change. The policy does not indicate how such requests are handled, since that procedure would be contained in the administrative guidelines or student handbook. Adoption of this new policy is recommended to align with state statute, but is not required. I'll give you an instance. As an administrator in a former district, I had a student who was training for the U.S. Olympics for gymnastics and had to leave twice a week an hour and a half before the school day ended. And as a middle school principal, we took attendance every hour, that starts to add up per our last policy of attendance, and those were medically excused absences. Those were parent excused. So truancy plays into a point once you hit a certain threshold. Even though the student was good standing and they weren't hanging out, in someone's basement. They were training to be a U.S. Olympic athlete. We had a policy like this in place where modifications could be made to their curricular program to allow the student to leave with the work of the director of teaching and learning. The superintendent ultimately said okay to this, where we could alter their instructional day on those 2 days, and they still were in good state. As long as they met certain criteria, they would still be promoted to past 8th grade to the high school. So those unique circumstances, and it might also come up in some medical instances too, where there might be prolonged broken arm or leg or something, that would allow for the district to accommodate students. And if the program modifications weren't working, then we would go back to expectations of a regular standard schedule.
This is modifications for individual basis, not
Correct.
programmable
Correct.
basis, right?
Yep.
And then for the edits in here, I just saw two little green box
Yep, that means everything below.
below it.
Yep. Since this is a new policy, there's nothing to strike.
Yeah, and well, I think it's good to have it written in policy so we're not kind of on a whim trying to figure some of these things out, right?
Right, which could lead to inconsistency from building to building. Or,
Student to student.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
And certainly, it calls out, once we approve it, it falls to you.
Yep.
You make that decision ultimately
Right.
if a modification is needed.
Is there, that's one thing I didn't see or I might have missed, is there a review process if,
Like appeal?
yeah, an appeal process, if your decision or Jake's decision would not,
Yeah, any decision made by the board or its designee regarding a request for a program or curricular modification
Oh.
may be appealed by the
Thank you.
parent to the
Sorry.
board.
I did miss that there. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, it does have
Yes,
an appeal.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
these are unique circumstances usually, but it's nice to have something in place when those pop up.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. Next one is 5330. Administration of medication or emergency care.
Yeah, this policy is updated to clarify options and it includes revision language regarding the storage of medications. This revision is recommended for consistency with current practices.
I see the call out of the EpiPens in here, but what about the Narcan? We have Narcan in each of our schools now, administering of that. Should that be identified in here?
It can be. Mr. Soderberg, where do you see the call out for EpiPens, just so I...
Page 2 of 3.
Bold heading.
Oh, yeah.
Epinephrine auto-injectors.
We may want to call out Narcan. Until such time that the administration closes the southern border, so it doesn't flow over fentanyl.
Good luck. Well, the way I read this was like for medications being brought in by students or their parents.
Correct. That's a good point. These are medications that, that's something we have EpiPens, our EpiPens we have are because they're brought from the family.
So I have an existing allergy and I just have that.
Correct.
and I-
I'm allergic to bees.
It's in the nurse's office then?
Correct.
Okay.
And storage of it. Or I have
But I would,
seizure medication.
Well, the title is, 5330 is Administration of Medicine / Emergency Care. And yeah, EpiPen would be definitely emergency care. If you're on meds, you're just going to go down there at 2 o'clock and take your meds.
I'd see how Narcan would play into the emergency
Right.
portion of this, right?
That's kind of why I'm calling that out.
Yep.
So
Yep.
So would the recommendation to be the bold heading / Narcan and then language below, or on a whole new section?
I believe they were supposed to get some training on it, right? We approved a donation for it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
our health room officials.
So we probably need some language on administered by a trained,
well, yeah.
untrained.
I mean, I think they're in vending machines now all throughout Milwaukee
Yeah.
County
Yeah.
now,
It's-
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
And training, I was trained by the health department.
it,
It took,
the training is
minutes.
give it,
you watch a
get it
video
in the
and
nasal
sign off that
passages, yeah.
you know how to do what you saw in the video.
But maybe there should be, just,
We have it.
Yep.
Based on board action.
Well, can I make a recommendation that we move forward with this policy as it currently is, and we'll start to draft a modification
Sure.
to include Narcan, since we will have to figure out what the training is going to look like,
yeah, it's,
who will replace the Narcan as it expires,
it is a,
things like that.
yeah, if it would be most appropriate in here or potentially somewhere else, but here's a good spot for it, I would think.
Yeah, the
right?
next policy is student accident / illness, concussion. you know, that's rather broad, but I didn't see anything in there, so I think it's probably more appropriate than the one we're just talking about now, so.
Yeah, the next one is pretty tight related to two statutes, the
Yep.
concussion, cardiac arrest. So if I heard Mr. Barney right, approve as is, and then we'll work on draft
As it is,
language
right,
with
because I think
adding-
it may need its own section of multiple paragraphs to
We're
cover.
not gonna be able to hammer it out.
No.
Not here.
No.
And I'll talk with Neola to see if other districts have or they have language related to Narcan as well.
Okay. Good. 5340, I believe, is our next one. Student accidents, illness, concussion, and sudden cardiac arrest.
Yes, I think we just revised this in September, and now it's back again with some changes. This policy has been revised to reflect the best practices regarding health, safety, and welfare of students. When a teacher or coach determines a student is exhibiting signs, symptoms, or behaviors consistent with concussion or head injury, this revision is recommended for consistency and best practice. So it's not only related to sports, but if there's a
Also classroom, right.
specifically physical education. So I've talked to Miss Unerdal about the trainings we do with our coaches, and we'll mirror that with our physical education teachers as well for those signs and symptoms. And then the roles and responsibilities of teachers, parents, and coaches are outlined here as well.
That's good. Yeah, you definitely want to recognize it early if you can,
Yep.
and remove them from that activity.
So page 2, paragraph 3. Teachers or coaches who suspect a student, and then it kind of goes on, submit it to the blank attending school blank office.
Those should have been just attending school office. It's
Okay.
just a space. It was
Yeah, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
it was revised in board docs and then
Yeah.
it wasn't deleted out.
I've got a question, you know, we call out concussion, then we call out if someone is symptomatic or experiencing signs, what the next steps are. Teachers shall do this, that type of thing. But then you go down to sudden cardiac arrest, it's more awareness, but we don't call out, you know, what the mitigation is or what the next steps are from a response. But we do above, parents shall be notified.
Mm-hmm.
Should we have anything in here about, we will ensure that at sporting events we have an AED on site, that type of thing, with trained staff, that type of thing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's a good question. I don't know for sure, but I believe, don't we have policy regarding AED in our school settings? There's regulations and statute in certain aspects of buildings,
I'll
like
look
of
while we're discussing,
gymnasiums.
see if I can find it.
I believe we have AED policy.
Okay, I'm just saying that this is probably just a boilerplate that we get from the state, put this in there, but if we're calling out what the next steps are associated with concussion, parents will do this,
Yeah.
teachers will do this, why wouldn't we do the same for sudden cardiac arrest?
And the
requiring
sudden
we
cardiac
have-
arrest part from this was told by us by the state just in the fall to add, maybe they haven't determined because these concussion pieces weren't there previous.
Got it.
Not that that's I agree with you, Bob, that's not the right
Yeah, just something
way.
to
It's
think about.
yeah, it's
Maybe
what
at a later revision. just add
maybe
that.
they're working through. We'll have another revision in 3 months.
We have policy 8452, which is automated external defibrillators, which then says administrative guidelines will be created. And if I go look at administrative guideline 8452, only trained AED users shall operate the AED. After the use, the AED officer and medical director review the incident. So it goes into
The detail.
a little more detail.
Yeah. Again, I'm just calling it out, you know, the first paragraph is severe damage and death can occur very quickly without immediate treatment. And above, we address what the next steps are from a treatment standpoint, notification, but we don't do anything in the sudden cardiac arrest, so.
Is it an oversight? Because it should be simply call 911?
Yeah, because it's
I
severe
don't know, you
immediate
shouldn't have to
versus.
tell people that, but,
Yeah, no, I.
but maybe we should put in there,
The world
if,
and I work, yeah.
you know, if if there's a situation during the school hours or athletic events, take appropriate action to
Yeah.
include call 911, and if there's an AED, that type of thing.
Yeah, there was just an incident at an Arrowhead basketball game
Yeah.
where the student just collapsed and immediately the AED was pulled and utilized.
Maybe add another revision. Next time you revise this, just add another
And there might be
paragraph in
more
there.
that comes,
Right.
but yes, I'll make note of that.
Okay. I think we'll move on to 5410.
This policy is updated to include new definitions to match current administrative guidelines for promotion, placement, and retention. Updating drafting notes are also provided. Mr. Miziak and I spent a lot of time on this. Again, this policy, Neola recommended revisions as it was outdated. However, it was up to local decision as each school district's governing body and administration work together to determine promotion, placement, and retention when it comes to
This is-
movement through our system. So this is our link. Mr. Miziak and I worked on this together.
And this is in regards to students
Correct.
moving through the grades,
Correct.
not. That's when
Not
people
staff. Yep.
people listening
Yep,
or
yep.
watching it. I just
It's in the
want to-
500 section or
Yeah.
5,000 section for
Yeah.
students.
How does this? Is this current practice? We're just putting it the language here, or is this best practice and we're updating it to what we should be?
We
doing?
took the current and then we updated it to what our belief is that we should, related to state assessments and research on retention and the given data points we do have when you think about a fifth grader being promoted to middle school and eighth grader be promoted to the high
This-
school level.
It's just a check and balance to make sure we're not slipping somebody through the cracks. We're just kind of pushing them along. We're making sure they're at where they need to be successful for that next run of grades.
Yep. And this would be the minimum, the bottom. Obviously, we want to go to the ceiling, exceed the ceiling, but this at least puts into place so when we think about students that are at risk for not being promoted to those next grade levels, as well as promotion beyond the middle school setting, we have some guidelines to go by instead of just maybe feelings or beliefs.
I see in the new language that's added, we're maybe catching that and not promoting from grade 4 to 5, but then later from 8, we might keep them from going into 9th to high school. Why is it not being promoted from 5th to 6th?
So there's a lot of research socially and developmentally that retention at younger grades can lead to actually worse performance over time because you're not moving along with age-appropriate peers, where going through middle school, you're now maybe you've gone through puberty, you're more socially aware, and that's less of a lag to be successful in high school than it might be that we hold back an elementary student in an elementary setting another year, but they're progressing socially more rapidly in their maturity levels at
Sure.
those age groups than they would be as a high school student.
Okay, makes sense. All right, any other discussion from the committee? All right, next one is another tobacco and nicotine. Tweak the same
Covered.
clarification. This one is for students, the student policy. And then we have 5517, student anti-harassment.
So this is an update to our student anti-harassment policy with revisions for the purpose of consistency with current laws and regulations regarding student anti-harassment. Adoption is recommended for policy language consistent with applicable law from Neola's legal, as well as I did have the update made previously to make sure that I believe, where is this? This is a long policy.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yes. And this, I believe, will be a policy we'll see over and over again with changes as law changes. Oh, I'm sorry. And then it also outlines on page 5 that we had a technical change that the board didn't need to approve that I had made in the beginning of the year, that Jake Miziak, Director of Teaching and Learning, is our compliance officer because the name on there previously, that employee is no longer in the district.
All right,
Obviously, technical change not warranting a full board policy meeting. So you'll see that it's not highlighted in green as a change because we needed to make sure we're in compliance with a designated compliance officer.
Say, from some of my exposure in regards to district happenings, a lot of the changes that I'm seeing in here are tightening up or giving direction to staff to build out consistency in how we're handling these situations, which seem to, prior to this administration, be handled at times unevenly, and probably due to the lack of direction, right?
I would agree. We've utilized this policy more than a handful of times this year, and having it very scripted and to the point has allowed our administration to know when to reach out to Mr. Miziak to bring in him as the compliance officer, and then the communication with parents, staff that it's involved, as well as administration and law enforcement at times.
I guess my question is, in the first paragraph on page 1, last sentence, this policy applies to conduct occurring in any manner, blah, 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 on school property or any other location during an activity sponsored by the board, et cetera. When you go down, and I'm going to focus on bullying. I understand that if it happens at a school-sponsored event or in the 4 walls, but what about cyberbullying? What about if I send something to you and it mushrooms? And we did have a case like that last couple of years.
Yep.
Where is that covered? And maybe it's outside of, if it happens outside the 4 walls, our hands are tied. We can't do anything about it. But it's student to student.
Yep. So there's a couple factors we think through when applying this policy or our bullying policy with cyberbullying. Did it happen during the school day? Did it happen on our network? Did it happen with our devices? Did it happen in one of our forums? So let's say it is after school, but it's happening through Google Classroom or Schoology. It happening via Snapchat, that is not one of our entities that we govern. Then if we're aware of that, then that's where we include law enforcement right away, that they can intervene for an outside reason. But if it's through one of our platforms,
Right. Okay.
then now we have some jurisdiction to act, but we'd still include law enforcement because if it's happening every night,
Right. Okay.
outside school day.
Got it.
So we weigh all those factors on what's the level of involvement, and obviously, even if we could wash our hands, we're still working with our local law enforcement and contacting parents to say we're aware this is happening on Instagram at night after school, those type of things.
Saying that, should we identify like a paragraph in the bullying section? Like if bullying occurs outside of the school setting or a sponsored event, whether it's downtown, whatever, I'm kicking your butt, that type of thing, or I'm threatening you, or I do it via social media, should we call that out, that we will partner with law enforcement, et cetera, like what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think we need to be more aggressive in that space. Just because it doesn't happen here doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything about it.
And we're made aware when it's reported. And one of the venues we have this year for reporting that right away is acted upon is Speak Up, Speak Out, that database that is monitored by our administration as well as local law enforcement. So when it is some threat like that there might be a screenshot shared that something's going to go down outside the school day and it's the night before, law enforcement's aware that they alert us so we can be aware in our school setting, and then they're acting on it. That's when it's reported, and so we're using that venue for those reports.
Right.
Because if we don't know, we're not, we're not watching
understand.
Snapchat all night long.
Right.
I don't think Joel wants to do that. So.
Right.
It's a job for some people.
Yeah, it is. Sure is.
All right. Any other discussion on 5517?
I know this policy makes reference to Title IX, but if certain things occur that kick it from harassment into a Title IX investigation, obviously there's a drastically different approach at that point. Compliance officer is still involved and probably is the one making that decision.
Yes. We have currently 2 in Title IX investigations underway that went from this to kick into Title IX regulation and as you're aware, the very scripted deadlines and what information can and cannot be shared.
So that was be my next. Do we have appropriate timelines? I didn't think I saw it, but I'm trying to remember 36 different policies at once here.
Yeah.
Do we have timelines written out, or would it behoove us to have?
We follow it. I think we kick right to when it comes to. Are you speaking Title IX specifically?
No, if it doesn't go to Title IX, which enacts some of that, but would stay just under this particular policy, and I don't remember seeing any timeline.
No, I think
issues.
it's
The board will take prompt steps to impose disciplinary action on individuals
it's
engaging.
actually easier to be more prompt when it's not a Title IX situation because the
So, but the statement Tom had just made, the board should take prompt action. Well, the board's generally not aware of this until administration makes us aware of it. I'm not sure how we take prompt action if we haven't been made aware of something.
Yeah, I agree. The board directs the
but-
district administrator
but
to
I-
take prompt action?
I would think it's going to have to do something like that because there's certain situations where we can't be, we can be notified of the general situation, but not the specifics to
Right.
take prompt action because we have to keep ourselves available for any particular appeals hearings or disciplinary hearings later on that may result from this.
Yeah, so where I was reading is the end of page 1, under the heading Other Violations of Anti-Harassment Policy. The board will also take prompt steps to impose disciplinary action on individuals engaging in any of the following prohibited acts. Yeah,
I
to
think
your
that's
point.
a very simple solution, with your wording.
Yeah, to your point, right, the board is likely aware of the general topic, but not the specifics.
correct.
Yeah, so I would think that would be better to be, the board directs the superintendent to take prompt steps.
Yeah, or district administrator.
District administrator,
Just to
right,
keep
consistency.
consistent.
Yeah. Chris, does that make sense for you?
Yep.
Okay.
Just another thing for your plate.
Memorize all these policies, right?
Just a la carte, that's okay.
So.
But it's good when, you go to policy when something happens and that gives clear direction.
It
Yep.
needs to be clear,
Yep.
certainly.
So, page 3 and subsequent pages, sexual harassment, race, color harassment, religious harassment. Again, this is at a school-sponsored event or within the 4 walls of the school. If it happens outside of our domain, then nothing we can do about it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I would.
We notify law enforcement,
Yep,
but
we notify law enforcement, and then once it does leak into our domain, then we act.
I would, I don't know if I want to go down this route, but I'm sorry, I will. Group of students consistently leaves post-school day and attends a establishment regularly, and then becomes an issue in that establishment regularly. Obviously, that's a law between them and the law enforcement. I think there's been situations in the past where people are wondering what the school's doing about that.
Mhm.
To your point, it's not our event, it's not our property. They are our students, but they're off of our time. Does the district still play a role in helping mitigate or communicate to them and their parents, this is a continual situation and it needs to be addressed? Obviously, it's a parental issue at that point, potentially law enforcement, but
Yeah, I'm walking down to Starbucks, with a group of people from the high school.
Yeah.
And stuff happens on the sidewalk or in Starbucks. It could be everything, all the above.
Yeah.
There are kids. Yeah, it happened off-site, but I'm just wondering, should we have something in here like off-site activity or behavior? And just put 1 or 2 sentences in there.
Well, if they did something at Starbucks and law enforcement is involved, we're notified as a school. speak to them if they're an athlete or something like that. There's code of conduct violation.
Yeah, I know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I know Joel does a great job day one of school or day two when he has the school assembly about thou shalt not do this.
Yeah.
Does he cover things like that about if it happens outside of our domain? Let us know. See something, say something.
Yeah.
Because that's harassment. That's bullying.
I think kids report that all the time when things have happened outside of the school day that could percolate back into the school environment. So we should be aware, or they are seeking advice, guidance, or counseling from administration, school counselors, or our SROs.
That's what I think our athletic code of conduct gives reach to those situations. But our internal disciplinary, student disciplinary stuff does not give reach to those
Because
situations.
our code of conduct is related to classroom, school environment, not what you do in the community.
And the logic then for the athletic code is those are privileged things, not
A right.
a right. And that's where the line's being drawn.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Does it have to be drawn there?
I would have to consult legal. I don't know of any school district that has policy related to student conduct in the community, because that would become a full-time. I mean, people, now we're disciplining for conduct in the community that we have no one working.
No
set
jurisdiction
hours.
over.
Discipline. I'm saying that what I would like to see is just a call out, just a placeholder. We address it, saying that we have no jurisdiction if things happen outside of
I see.
school conduct or a sporting event conduct. If I drink a beer at a party and I get busted by the cops, that's not good.
Yeah.
Am
So
I going to be kicked out of my sporting event?
something along the lines of violations of this policy that may occur outside of the school environment may be reported to law enforcement for further investigation.
I mean, there's been such an increase, and I attribute this to the pandemic and also social media, on self-harm matters, suicides. And what's causing that? Well, a lot of this crap that's outside our four walls. And I'm saying, why can't we just address it and say something about it and just say, hey, if we hear something, we will notify law enforcement and they'll take the lead or whatever it is.
Yeah, law enforcement, parents,
Right.
whoever we can bring in that affect that outside.
But the behavior is
We can't just,
still not acceptable.
correct, to that exact point, the behavior's not acceptable, and if we're aware of it, sticking our heads in the sand is also not acceptable,
Right.
even though it's not our responsibility per
Wash your
se.
hands. Nope. Kick the can down the
We
road.
need to make sure the parents know,
Right.
or law, depending on the level of issue, but, yeah, I think there's,
Yeah, school district involvement is limited because it happens outside of whatever. We'll partner with whomever.
but we'll be proactive in.
Right.
Do you
But
wanna-
the behavior is not acceptable. I'll write something and then send it to you guys that we'll include. I think we should add something, a little placeholder. I don't know where.
I would almost make it, if it's specific to this, make it a section.
After disability harassment, or make its own section? I don't know.
I would make it its own section saying any of the above that have been reported as outside incidents to the district will take the appropriate notification steps, or however you want to word it, but
Yes.
I'd make it its own section.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Chris, on where you
Yeah,
want that?
that's where I'm looking.
I think we need to call out, based on what's happening in our current environment,
Yeah.
with self-harm and suicide.
Does it make sense at the forefront of the policy, though, after prohibited harassment?
I would
After that
almost
last paragraph, then start a new header that says,
any of the following that
yeah,
occur
or,
outside,
or
but are purview to the district.
violations of policy during or the header could be non-school day, non-school environment, and then it could be a statement like stating that in those, right, because it,
Fine with me.
And
This
not that we're
assumes-
going looking for that, but if we're made aware of it,
Right.
Correct.
yes.
we'll refer to law enforcement.
Oh, my God.
Just thinking forward to the board meeting, maybe we make a separate motion to add the language that you come up with.
Well, it's going to move forward with a positive recommendation.
Right, but we don't have your language unless we take a few minutes to craft it now.
Yeah.
We could pull this particular policy
I could
off
pull it and put it in.
new business.
We could
business.
give staff instruction that we're gonna approve it, with the addition of the following. I think we can. No?
I don't think it can go as a positive recommendation.
No.
'Cause we
Yeah.
don't know what the language is.
Okay.
But we could, when we talk through policy updates, we can do all of the policies except this one in
Mhm.
one fell swoop, and
Okay.
then
All right.
separately come back with the edits to this.
In the policy committee portion, or in
Sure,
new
I would think
business?
in the policy committee. We discussed it here. We knew another update was coming forward. If you can get that in the next couple days,
Yeah.
it can be part of.
I'll make it
Probably.
I'll make it item C under policy committee after overview and
I have a
then
hard time
positive
writing that.
recommendation of
Yeah.
all these. Then I'll just call this policy out separate as item C on the agenda.
I think that'll work.
Or maybe I got senioritis, that's what I.
I sit over here, I'm the young guy.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the consent agenda.
Yeah, and then we'd have to.
But are you okay? Does that make sense?
It does. It's very.
Maybe not 5 years ago, but today
No,
with
it
self-harm,
helped-
suicides.
Yep, it helps us internally to navigate
Right.
kind of black and white, but also put some onus on families and their responsibility too.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I don't want to see us putting our heads in the sand on those types of issues.
Yep.
So just thinking forward, when we get to the point of someone making a motion to recommend approval of these policies to the board,
Except
do we want to
this
call
one?
out?
With the exception.
With the
of
exception.
55-17.
So when this goes to the board on Monday, you're gonna do the report out.
It will need a motion and a second then.
Okay,
to
so you're
approve
gonna
it.
call out, you're gonna have, on this group of policies, and then you're gonna have a separate policy, this policy.
This will be
Yes.
called out as its own item.
And then we
under-
need a second.
We'll need a second for
Right, got
this
it.
For
policy.
this one.
Got it.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. Anything else on 5517? Okay. 5771.
Search and seizure. This.
Oh, well, 5722 is actually next, I think, but
Did I?
that's fine. 5771 if that's next in your.
5722, is that what you had said? School-sponsored publication?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had my packet out of order. This policy has school-sponsored publications and productions. Policy has been revised to reflect the diverse types of student publications and productions currently available in the digital age. This replacement policy is proposed because of the wide variety of school-sponsored student media that are present in schools today, and due to the many technological advances that have occurred. The language in this policy has been modified to encompass the newer online electronic forms of school-sponsored student media. Policy provides 4 options to consider. I've shared the option that is pretty common in our region that is being used. The recommendations made in this policy should be carefully considered when addressing the evolving student media environment, and language should be adopted that best fits the district needs. There's a lot of cross-reference here to other policies, specifically bylaws and definitions.
So there's a lot of red.
Yep.
Removing a lot.
Yeah, and then a lot of green.
So it was updating versus dropping in a lot of green. It was kind of striking to update language. So that's why I wrote it this way rather than
Yep.
green, red, green, red.
Yeah, every other word.
So if we have one of our affinity groups putting on, sponsoring an event at the PAC, this covers that, correct?
From the use of their what they're publicizing in the production of of how they're publicizing in the media they use.
Okay, so do we have anything in here that all playbills, newspapers, notices, blah, 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 must be approved by administration? So that we don't have that issue that we had recently?
Correct.
It's right where I was gonna go.
There is, it's the middle of page 2.
2, yeah.
The paragraph that starts off with the following speech is unprotected. The last sentence, The board authorizes the administration to engage in prior review and restraint of school-sponsored publications and productions to prevent the publication or performance of unprotected speech. So that references
Yeah,
a
but-
prior review, but
Right.
Yeah, but unprotected speech is a very legal term, right? Like,
I would say, going back up to the first paragraph on page 2, where it does address yearbooks, playbills, newspapers, notices, pamphlets. We have something in there that said all school-sponsored student media prior to release must be approved by administration. And administration is very broad. It could be the advisor on that group.
I would say district administrator or designee, so that
Yeah, okay.
it's going through myself, probably Sarah, Joel. Most of our production is at the high school.
Yes, again, so we don't have a repeat of what happened, so.
So, would you mind saying that again?
School-sponsored media, does not include blah, blah, blah. I don't know where I put
All
it.
it could go to the last sentence of that first paragraph on page 2.
The last sentence.
just after
it
the,
would
Yep.
just be added. It'd be added
yeah.
language.
All
Yeah,
school-sponsored media.
Must be approved prior to release or publication or distribution.
So
The devil's
school-
in the details. Now, that's a slippery slope, okay? I want to put something out on social media. Do I have to get that approved? But again, the student wouldn't do that.
No.
yeah. And
Again, this is
I think
specific for students.
there's communication for social media is already, I think
Right.
there's a policy around that.
So did I capture this right? School-sponsored media must be approved by the district administrator or designee prior to release or distribution? Is that
Student.
student
School-sponsored
or
student media,
school-sponsored student
right.
media must be approved by the district administrator or designee prior to release or distribution? Do we need distribution or just prior to
How about
release?
prior to publication?
Publication?
That kind of encompasses both.
And that's gonna trickle down to some of the simplest of things, right? But the music teacher can
Does
get the
a-
blessing of the principal or
Fourth
whoever you
grade
need it.
concert, right? And
Yeah.
says to.
But it's to your designee in those
Yep.
situations.
It's probably going to be the building level principal.
Yeah.
Yep. That the program or playbill says it's appropriate, right?
All right, so now I want to get clarity on the language at the last paragraph on page 2. I'll give you a minute to get there.
Just the all school sponsored.
Yeah,
student?
all school-sponsored student media shall contain a notice to the reader viewer that the material, while school-sponsored, is student-directed and not subject to prior review. Guess I'm a little confused about the not subject to prior review portion of that statement.
I'm sorry, Tom, where are you at again?
Page 2,
Yep,
last paragraph, starting with all school-sponsored student media.
Given all student publications and or productions have been designated as limited purpose public forums, the school assumes no liability for their content. I don't know how we do that. How would the school never assume liability for something our students are doing under our
Direction.
direction? Or, you know,
well, that paragraph negates what we just talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could strike that out now. That
with editorial controls comes responsibility. Student journalists, content creators, and I just don't know if that's even without what we've just talked about adding, this paragraph had concerned me. Like I said, I don't know how we can't be liable for content made under our,
if a student
Well, yeah,
creates the
they're gonna
content.
call us a bunch of knuckleheads. These are your kids. They're using the PAC or whatever. How could you not have knowledge, control of it?
yeah. Well, liability, I mean, there's.
Right.
Yeah, if we're going to strike any, I don't know we have to strike everything. I mean, from the with editorial control comes responsibility. I think the rest of that paragraph makes sense. Student
Right, 'cause
journalists, content
and
creators.
then it outlines on the next page the pretty much criteria when it comes to student created content for distribution.
Right, and what
What
school officials can use to
may-
review or reject
may
the content.
review the content and reject based on the following four.
so we would
Is that, is this legal from board or from
Neola.
Neola? Is this why we're getting this wording?
correct.
So then, the way they have this worded in their legal team, I would think would state it becomes a freedom of protected speech issue. Basically saying the change we were just asking for is probably not.
Again, students can't do whatever they want to do.
No,
in school.
I agree with that.
They can't.
I agree with that. But the way this is worded is saying, yes, they can unless it meets one of these four.
Yeah, I think we need to
We need
wordsmith
to
that
tighten that up.
or strike it completely.
I would agree with Tom where on page 2 we strike everything prior to with editorial control comes responsibility. Is that what you had said, Mr. Barney?
To a point, the first part of that, or the very first sentence, where we're saying any school-sponsored media is going to have a notice to the viewer that it is student-directed,
Period.
period. Maybe right there. That it's not bad that if we're going to have student-sponsored content that we call out that it is student-directed. So I wonder if
And
after
then
the word
get rid of
directed,
and not subject to prior review is strike.
right, that we strike and not subject to prior review.
And if you get rid of that, then you should probably be getting rid of the beginning of page 3, which outlines the things you can review.
I don't follow. Why
So
would we
you're-
want to get rid of the things that we can review?
Because you can review it for any reason. Why would we limit ourselves to those 4 topics, which would take out the issue that we had the other day, or the other.
We're saying no matter what it can be reviewed, so we would take the criteria.
This box is in what we can review.
Right. So do we need to just specifically call out then that school officials may review the content and reject an article publication or production due to any reason? Or
There would be.
right. I think there needs
I'm
to
gonna
be some
guess-
clarity.
Legal would want more than just that.
Right.
For sure. Because there is, well, they can't do whatever they want. There are speech issues involved here.
That students have rights in the school setting as
That-
students and not employees.
What we may want to consider is, because we're a lot of back and forth going on this thing, we strike this right now, and we
This could go for a little bit more discussion, legal review.
write legal
We
review
can bring
and
this
bring it
back.
back.
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
What's the policy number here?
'Cause I don't know how to wordsmith it,
5722.
quite
Yeah,
frankly.
5722. Unless
I would want to do more legal analysis of what we're talking about before we get ourselves
Yeah, because on page 3
in a freedom of speech issue.
because that says on page 3 of 3 after D, school-sponsored student media may not be published, performed outside the school as defined in policy, except the prior approval of the building principal. So we addressed that the building principal is going to be reviewing it.
And then the advertising piece, its district administrator retains the final authority to determine whether an advertisement is appropriate and will be included, which is should from a district standpoint of branding and how we promote.
And again, this doesn't cover discussions that are occurring within the affinity groups, because I don't think we should have that in
No.
here.
No, this is publications
publication,
surrounding
yep.
events.
Okay,
It's separate from content of approval of events.
okay.
Student newspaper or
Yep.
published article of some sort in,
Posters in hallways that kid groups put up, those type of things.
Yeah, so things I'm thinking that I've seen, different groups put up different things.
Mhm.
Those are publications. I've walked through the buildings and seen things, and I've asked, and people are, what are you talking about? What do you mean that's up? Why would that be up? I don't know what's up.
Right.
This would prevent a student from just being able to,
Create a poster and
Create a
put it on the
poster.
wall.
Is there a pressing item that you need this language added now, or is it okay to?
It is okay,
review
and this is a policy that is very different in every district. With working with Neola, they recommended taking a draft at it,
Sure.
having discussion and see where it went. So it's not a pressing issue that there's a concern, but it's a policy that needs to bear local teeth into it.
All right, then just like 5517, we can exclude 5722.
I got
And we could bring this
I
back
got
this
senior
summer,
honors, remember?
Mr. Barney, or this spring. We could bring this back.
Sure.
I'll reach back out to Neola with kind of a recap of our conversation. I've looked at about 4 other districts and what their language is, and it's based on community.
Sure. Okay.
And Neola should be able to provide us the legal insight to it too,
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't have to use our legal.
I don't think so.
Given,
I wouldn't
given we're
think
already
so.
paying Neola for their legal
Correct.
advice.
Correct.
And to your point, I believe I recall seeing this at the high school. When you look at the bulletin boards, there's a stamp on there that says approved on the posters. So I think there's a protocol in place at the high school.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's steeped in policy. That's more so, I think through administration, they approve.
Okay.
Joel might just have
Sarah
that
does as
or
well,
Sarah,
yeah.
Got it.
But that doesn't mean always that things aren't put up that aren't approved. So we'll table this for future discussion.
Table this one. Yep. Okay. Then we'll move on to 5771, search and seizure.
This policy is revised to provide an additional option for the frequency of inspection and an updated statutory reference. The board, so you'll see that the board directs the principal to provide students with written notice of this policy at least annually, which we do through our student handbooks, and the inspection's done at the discretion of the principal of all storage places. I chose not to recommend annually because every storage place would mean every locker, every area. We do bring in K-9 units at the secondary level, and anything that's hit on is searched, as well as when there's suspicion.
Is this facility securities? Am I on the right? It starts at, we're at 7440, right?
57.
No, 5771.
Sorry, I clicked a note and I went down, and it's
Search
also
and-
involving search and seizure.
Search
so
and seizure.
Yeah, that one's a little different.
I got some questions on that one.
All right. Anything more on 5771?
Give me 2 seconds. I just want to.
The biggest changes we're just calling out.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
the
don't-
principal.
No, I don't. I just wanted to make sure I didn't have a note that I missed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. And 6235,
Yep, this
fund
recommenda-
balance.
Yeah, this recommendation is from Brittany, to change the Fund 10 balance shall not fall below 12% to 17%, which would allow for far less short-term borrowing as we build capital and fund balance.
So that
Where
was
are
my
we-
question.
Where are
What-
we at right now?
We're hovering right below 12
Oh, we are,
Yeah.
okay.
with
I-
a concerted effort the last few years and moving forward to
I can
exceed that.
I can appreciate setting a goal so that you have a mark to attain, but with language like Fund 10 balance shall not fall below 17%, well, we're already in violation of our policy as soon as we would approve it.
Sure.
That would be my
And I
concern.
think we currently are. I believe we currently are below 12.
Yeah, so is it a shall should be changed to a should?
Right, and
So that there is wiggle room in case of
yeah, and I'm
Well, you're not.
as I
I
think
can't see the budget getting to 17% between now and next year.
What is the gap, 12 to 17%? How much is that?
I don't
3
know.
million? That's significant. We're
Yeah.
gonna, if we pass this, and we don't change the word for Michelle,
And
Does it make
we're already
sense?
not
we're gonna cut
meeting
3
it.
million.
But we're already not
Right
meeting
now.
the 12.
You're
Right.
right, and I'm just thinking of our funding cycle. We go out for short-term borrowing because we are out of money until tax revenue comes in. At that point, we're way below 12%.
I mean, this is the goal, right?
Sure.
Each year we're reducing.
I understand the
that
goal.
short-term
I'm just
borrowing.
worried about the language of Fund 10 balance shall
Oh.
not fall below 17.
Correct. Yeah, we can't say that. We can't even keep 12 right now. We're not at 12 right now. How we're in violation of it.
And do we need to clarify?
How about objective? The Fund 10 fund balance, how about the Fund 10 balance shall
I get what was
objective?
before we get into the wording of it.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning or the discussion around going from a goal not met to a higher goal?
To make a concerted effort to get to that versus settling at, we got to 12.
So can we make this goal orientated now, and then once it's reached?
Once we've
once we
exceeded
reach
12%,
that-
we can have a reasonable.
Well, we could make the goal 17%, but once we reach that, then we should maintain this. We shall maintain this.
Yep.
Shall attempt. I don't know. You could wordsmith. I agree with you. And from a legacy standpoint, the reason why we created a goal in the first place was we were pushing 25%, 28%, a lot of money out there. And then the narrative in Madison was all these school districts had these healthy fund balances and they're still going out for referenda. So we said, okay, that's when we started paying for things out of fund balance for Rockfield, for the demolition of the 2 homes, for the 1.2 million for tech ed equipment.
Because we've been penalized for
Right.
budgeting
So we're
appropriately.
using the constituents' money, but then we said, okay, we need to have a goal. We can't go below this. So that's where the 12% came in.
Got you. You were putting a floor,
Right.
not a ceiling.
And now we got to get it back up because it does impact our borrowing. Shall,
Yeah,
we need to wordsmith that though.
It would save us money if we had 17%,
Whereby the fund
because we may not have
Fund
to
10
short-term borrow
balance.
then.
objective shall,
Well, this year we took 6, but only used, 2.3
the fund,
or 3.
whereby the Fund
Yep,
10
we're still paying
balance.
interest on that, so.
How about this? The Fund 10
Correct.
Right.
balance
Yeah.
goal
Which-
shall
But
be
that's a whole nother topic, right?
17%. The Fund 10 balance goal. And then once we hit the 17%, we changed the word goal and said shall. We're not going to fall below.
We just need a note to make sure we
Yeah.
come back to that.
And to go back to the question, what led to this? It's to have this in place so that when we are making contributions to fund balance, there's sound rationale related to policy versus why
yeah.
isn't that being
Well,
spent in other
I think
venues?
you're going to get that, right? If you go to 17, or like you said, 25 at one point?
Yeah.
We're way up in left field.
28.
Yeah.
Well, then the argument comes, well, you have the money. Well, but this is a strategic dollar, which saves us interest dollars.
And Baird, I think their latest release was a healthy where you want to sit is now around 25. So that narrative, changes based on economic times.
Right. Oh, yeah, right now with inflation and impending recession. Yeah, you want cash is king.
Right,
So,
right.
So do we need to strike or replace some language then in paragraph 2?
yes, shall. Whereby the Fund 10 fund balance goal shall not fall below 17%. Just add the word goal.
Goal, yeah.
And like I said, when we get there,
Yeah,
We'll come
and you can
back.
still keep shall not fall below. Well,
Yep.
it's a goal.
Okay.
I'm sure finance will appreciate that.
I just don't want the narrative to be,
I-
if we're gonna fund a school security officer, and we're gonna have a closed session on that, that, we can't do that because we have to take money to go up from 12 to 17%. We're not gonna do this because we gotta feed the fund balance.
Just because the balance isn't 0 doesn't mean it's not working for us in some form or
Right.
fashion. And that's important.
Yep,
One other comment specific to fund balance. In the wake of 2 bank failures over the last week, guess I have concerns about where that fund balance account might be. I know during our referendum, when we had $84 million deposited before we started paying bills, we paid a company to split our money across hundreds of accounts so that every one of them was FDIC insured or up to that amount,
Up to the cap.
up to the cap.
250,000.
That's a lot.
Right.
Of
So
accounts.
I wonder if what protections do we have on our Fund 10 balance, after we get all of the tax revenue and we're sitting on that bunch of money before we have to start paying salaries and, everything else. I'm just curious. I expect an answer now.
I'll get clarity
Just-
for the board and communicate.
We'll let Brittany leave early.
Yeah, and Jake and everybody.
No,
Maybe when
fine.
you do your report out, you can have a little paragraph on that and comment on that, because that's a very valid point.
Monday night.
Where's our money kept? I have no idea what what bank we use.
And I don't know that necessarily matters.
Well, I think it does. I got a
Well,
call
they're,
from
they're all insured.
But
If we're
It's-
insured.
it's-
is it,
50.
is
Right.
it, the key is it kept strategically to keep us protected?
Safe. Okay.
More work for you.
36 policies.
good call out.
Why did I do this?
All right.
I love this next one.
Payment of invoices, 6470.
I would
Yeah.
do 90 days, quite frankly.
Coming from the business office, they're asking to change each verified invoice to be paid, change from 30 days to 60 for two reasons. More time to question invoices that may arise, so that they have answers pertinent for the board as well as internally. And then if finance committee for any reason is not held in that given month, it gives time to approve those finances.
Well, I would say there's a third reason, and probably the highest priority is we keep the cash.
Sure. Without paying for something we may not
Free
have to
cash
pay
flow. We
for.
got the cash.
Yep. Ultimately, the business office has recommended this to me and to you, related to more time to investigate invoices that may or may not be accurate.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the change. I guess just a couple comments. Are we going to notify our vendors of this change if they're currently receiving payment within 30 days? They're going to want to know, and they may have a problem with it. And we may also have contractual obligations that would override this policy. So that'd be something to look at as well, maybe with Right Way, with teachers on call, with whoever we might pay for services.
You just add the simple line, unless contractually obligated otherwise.
Yeah, but once that contract or that agreement expires, sunsets, we're going to put
Yeah.
in 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could go the right way and say, okay, this is a board approved policy. We're going to do an addendum to the contract.
Yeah.
They may tell us to go pound sand, but
But in the life of the new contract, that would have
Right.
to be a stipulation.
What does that mean for the contract negotiation?
huh?
What would that mean in terms of a contract negotiation? Because that's us asking for something from them in the negotiations. We want to hold what is essentially eventually your
Well,
money.
I think we've got more leverage on our end.
I agree.
Saying if you want to continue to do business with us, these are the new T's and C's, terms and conditions. It's board approved.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking micro to the bus
Yeah,
thing. There's other
Yeah.
stuff.
Rush, to your point, do you see a need to make a statement that unless contractually obligated? I mean, obviously the board approves contracts, so the board has the authority to.
But we need to
Override.
have the flexibility if we are getting a better contract, more favorable rate to close it in 30 days instead of
60.
60.
60.
I think you're
Should we
covered.
give them the leeway there to do it?
I think you're covered here with that last sentence. Exceptions may occur with finance committee approval only. So if upon review of the contracts, you're going to go
Fair enough.
It would come
3
through
to 60,
finance.
you flag a handful of these things where there's nothing we can do about it, and
They're
Mike's
approved.
committee will sign off on it.
Yep.
So I think you got
Do-
covered.
Just trying to think, in the event that something may not come through finance? Do we need to say finance committee or board
Would be an
approval?
expenditure under
Under
15.
15,000? If it's a
15,000, which we could do.
$14,000 contract, it never hits finance committee, so it can't get an
It-
exception?
I can think of a lot of things that would be in that price range,
Right, so,
that a smaller vendor might be willing to.
Well, Office Max, on your district credit card, things like that.
all right, so I would
We're
think,
not
we-
gonna go to Visa and say, we're not gonna
Hey, right,
go from 30 to 60, they're gonna
Right.
tell us to go pound sand.
right.
Yeah, can you do that?
But these are
You get 'em to say
negotiated
yes, I don't know.
contracts more likely than a credit card one that we don't have much say in that.
yeah.
Do we feel we're covered?
Or do we want to say exceptions may occur with finance committee or board approval?
It doesn't hurt to add.
It just says submitted for board and then finance committee review. So I think that's an either or, but it doesn't.
Well, I'm going back to the each verified invoice is to be
I
paid
apologize.
within 60 days. Exceptions may occur with finance committee or board approval. If we had or board, I think that would,
Because if we need to,
Cover.
if there's not a committee and we bring it to the board.
yeah, some things come straight to the board
Especially
if
if the
we didn't
meeting
have
is
finance committee and then,
Yeah.
right, we'd miss it. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll add that or board.
Yep.
Okay. That would take us to 7434, tobacco and nicotine on school premises. I think this is similar to the other ones we've reviewed so
I think
far,
It's all the same language, yeah.
right? Then we go to,
I do have a question though, and I should have brought this up. Do we talk about THC, et cetera, CBD, we talk about the method, tobacco, lighted, heated, whatever, cigarette. What about gummies,
Edibles?
edibles? That's the right word, edibles. Should we cover that? In all of them, in all of the policies that we talked about? In addition to.
well, wouldn't that be included under marijuana and hemp plant derivative substances?
I guess it would be.
Or later in that same sentence, or any other variation thereof?
Plant derivative substances, whether or not, yeah, I guess the substances would be it. It could be vaping, it could be, edible. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
the substances language, I'm sure, is in there to curtail all the different manufactured versions of THC
Yeah,
and its constant molecular change to stay ahead of law. When you say substances, then that's the reference. I don't care what you change it to.
I just don't want someone to get a free out of jail card because we didn't identify edibles in here, but I think we're covered though, so.
I think that language is.
Well, to your point though, that language is under a paragraph about smoking, not about
The term smoking means.
edibles.
Well, the policy is use of
Tobacco
Tobacco and
and
nicotine. Wonder, do we have a separate policy on,
drug use, substance abuse, have a policy on that?
I would assume.
It's interesting though that they are folding all the THC in, but they also,
That's probably covering the vaping portion of it though.
yeah. But I think in general, I think there's a lot of tobacco products in certain states now that contain THC,
Mhm.
but they're a tobacco smoking product. This would get ahead of.
we have a separate policy, drug-free workplace, that says the use of marijuana and or products containing THC.
Oh, okay, we're covered,
Cover here.
we're covered,
Yeah,
cool.
This seems to be getting us ahead. It's a national organization, but we're talking about Wisconsin state law prohibits, but other states surrounding us don't prohibit, and this would help districts in those states greater than it really does anything for
Right.
us. Until state law does or potentially doesn't change.
All right. Anything else? We'll move on. 7440, facility security.
So the language has been added to reflect the recent Wisconsin Court of Appeals decision, which permits searches on non-student visitors or vehicles on school property under certain circumstances. See State versus Vang 398, Wisconsin 2D 311.
That's cited at the bottom of this?
Correct. In the actual policy. Yes. No.
No.
It's not.
So, and
It says in the update that it's cited in the legal reference,
which
but
is
it's not.
posted in the packet, right?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what you're
missing.
reading?
Yep.
It should be.
Yep.
'Cause my question was, what is the legal standing on this? And I didn't realize there was a,
Yeah, it's State versus Vang.
okay. No.
This is interesting. I had a lot of conversation with Neola about this because the added language is the board authorizes the district administrator to conduct searches of non-student visitors or vehicles on student property when there is a reasonable suspicion of violation of law or school rules, and the search is reasonable in the scope related to the objectives of the search and not excessively intrusive.
And if I don't comply with the search,
You have to leave.
You have to
gotta
leave.
leave.
Yep.
I think that's the only recourse you would have. You wouldn't have.
Because law enforcement's not gonna search somebody without.
I want to read the case law on this because I'm interested to see what the case was and what brought it forward. Either somebody challenged the school's ability to search their stuff, or they challenged that to be used as evidence in a criminal case because the school searched and found contraband. Right?
I'm going into a sporting event. I see a bulge on your hip.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I pat you down? No, I do mind. With the intent is you're probably carrying concealed, that type of thing.
Or you're going into a sporting event or a school function and you seem to be under a
Right.
mood altering substance. You smell, right?
You're at
So
the
I was
soccer
thinking-
field.
Can
so
I
you got a
search you?
backpack and we
Can I
think
search your
you're-
backpack or
you got
your
alcohol in there.
your carry on?
Right, I get it.
Or to this point, the vehicles, right?
Yep.
Um,
Someone's leaving the football game and going to their car repeatedly.
So I didn't have that case cited. I just want to read it.
I
They're in
asked
compliance with the case
with
law.
the number of districts that Neola works with throughout the state. I said this is interesting to me. What is the frequency of districts approving this language? And it's almost 100%. It just gives you the option
Yeah.
if there's a reasonable suspicion.
Well, and reasonable suspicion is a relative term to who's using it for scope of search.
Sure.
Should we have signage posted at our locations? We reserve the right to search.
Mm-hmm.
Per case law.
Yep.
Yeah.
And policy 7440.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Maybe at the football field, all the venues, sporting venues.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with it, especially if it's their citing case law. I just didn't get a chance to read that case law in my mind. My mind goes to prosecutorial issues.
Looks like it's from 2 years ago.
2021.
Yeah. April of 2021, State of Wisconsin versus
Vang.
Pong Matthew Vang.
But we might want to add that to the legal
Yeah,
post at
I
the
made
bottom.
note that must
Okay.
have been there.
One other note, I think this would apply to all policies. I see at the bottom of this one, the date is being updated to 2023. There are some in this packet that didn't have that update,
Okay.
but if we're reviewing them, they should all be
Yeah.
updated.
Some of them that
Likewise.
were not in this policy manual because our editing limitations internally.
Sure.
We just got it, copy and paste, and put it in
Understood.
a
I think like the
Google
fund
Doc.
balance one
That wasn't in this. That'll get updated when I send it off to production with our internal edits.
Likewise, the right above that, the copyright Neola revised. Should that date be the current date that we're revising it, board approved?
They'll
on
add
Monday?
the current date when I tell them the board approval night. That's the last time it was revised.
Oh,
The
okay.
7/29/19.
But when the board approves it, it'll reflect.
Then they'll
the
add
current
a
date.
new
Got it.
revision, and not until I give them the final that you approve Monday night.
Okay, cool.
All
Wonderful.
right. Anything else on facilities security? All right, let's move on to 7544, use of social media.
This policy is revised to add an intermediate option to the designation of permitted activity and forum determination of district-approved social media platforms. Review of this policy and current selections made by the district is strongly encouraged to ensure that the board policy and practices are consistent and deliberate. The selection was selection 2, or being recommended to you this evening. The district uses approved social media platforms. These all align with what are in our definitions and bylaw. The district-approved social media platform sites are considered limited public forums. District-authorized personnel may reply to comments asking direct questions with regard to dates, place, or times of district or building level events and/or programs, but will not respond to or engage in dialogue about any other comments received. This aligns with our current practice where we close off comments on social media when promoting mainly through our district Facebook page. Comments are closed off. You have to post and then you can say no comments. People can like it. From time to time, you'll see someone say, "This is great." You'll see 1 or 2 comments. One just happened because
Before you got it turned
the
off.
people are quick, which means they're looking at our stuff, which is good. But then we turn it off for future comments. And we have a program we pay for that archives social media for public record. So we can delete the comment if it was inappropriate, but then it's archived through a online database system that we have, so that if it's ever called into question or there's an open records request for it, we have it. So our general practice, and then this policy would align with this, we don't engage in conversation through our social media platforms. It's more
That makes
for
sense.
branding and promotion.
Right, if you've got a secretary at a school who posted about a PTA event that's coming up or something, you don't necessarily want them engaging in back and forth discussion. Sure, it's at this date, this time, this place,
Yep.
but that's...
Here's a contact to call or whatever
Sure.
it might be.
Yeah, notification announcements, yeah, but
Yep, makes sense.
I sent you a note, and also Brian, about banning TikTok. Would that be covered under here?
That is not a district approved. We don't utilize that platform in our bylaws. It's not in definitions of social media. If you go back to that, that's not one that we utilize. We don't utilize it as a district platform. This is related to what we use for social media. So we use Facebook primarily. But
So
when
we
it comes to
use-
student or those other uses. Some of the high school uses Instagram to promote pictures.
No, and the reason why I brought that up is it's consistent with what Washington County and the state of Wisconsin recently did by banning TikTok social media on any platform for the county or the state or device.
Or state-owned devices or
State-owned
county-owned
devices,
devices.
So I just wanted to carry that down to our district. I mean, if you want TikTok on your phone, I don't care. Just don't get online here and use it on our network, that type of thing.
Correct. We can block that, as well as anyone that receives any type of stipend or compensation for a device it shouldn't utilize.
Right.
Yeah. I think we're
So
gonna.
that's not covered under here.
No, that would be in our bylaw that's a non-supported social media.
Okay.
But I think we're gonna have future conversation.
Right.
so
Right.
when I'm on Facebook and I see all the different groups and clubs that have Facebook pages that seem school related, are they all related, or are they all under the control of the district, or potentially under the control of a volunteer for that group or
Probably
club?
the advisor, because the only Facebook accounts we have under control are district and school accounts.
PTA is going to have their
And
own
they're their own
accounts.
governing body, so they.
Yeah, no,
Right.
that I understand.
But you're saying, like,
I'm
let's
talking
say
about
the varsity soccer team.
The
Fox.
MacArthur Elementary Facebook page. Is that what, like,
That's
that's a
governed
district
by
page.
us.
right?
But I'm talking about it like that. Well, the ex-soccer team page, girls volleyball.
That are
boys
our
bas-
sports,
there
not
are
not a
sports
community.
teams,
Yeah,
or like the wrestling club. I see a lot of their stuff on there. Is that
the
controlled?
wrestling club is not our entity though.
Yeah.
They use our likeness.
It's like a
but
booster club.
Yeah,
type thing.
we don't have any say or control of that. But if it's
Powerlifting, right, would be another one in that same bracket.
unless
But
it-
if it's a sanctioned sport on our end, do we have control, or does an advisor or coach have control?
the advisor or coach does,
And
and
there
so
are-
we need to probably build some administrative guidelines around that tier down. Yep.
and maybe get
This
a
is the
list-
first year that with the
Yeah.
advent of Mandy and her
And-
position,
and I think it'd
we're
be
bringing
good-
the schools under.
I think it'd
the
be
district.
good to get a list of those. And I understand we don't have control over them, but I think participation on both ends, because I don't know why our schools wouldn't share
Mhm.
to build exposure to those clubs that we are approving. Like you said, there's probably some administrative guideline.
I'll review those, and those can be cleaned up at any time.
I just know there's a lot, and every once in a while I see one that it seems like as soon as I think I have them all liked, so I can see what's going on, another one pops
Yeah,
up.
one pops up.
That's not a bad thing. I just
Yeah.
it's a lot to.
Good call out. Something need to get our hands around. Okay. Next policy, 8405, Environmental Health and Safety Program.
This policy is revised to more closely align with statutory requirements for developing the indoor environmental quality plan, and additional and updated citations are added. It's recommended that it's adopted with the new language consistent with applicable law. Ran this through Mr. Lord as well.
I don't have any concerns with the changes here.
Who's the designee?
Frank, Mr. Lord, yeah.
I suppose that makes sense. I don't have anything on this one.
It's pretty straightforward.
All right, Bob, anything?
Nope.
Okay, next one is 8420.01.
This is the epidemics and pandemics. We've never had one of those, right?
I don't believe so.
This policy has been modified to avoid language that might be interpreted to implicate open meetings laws based on Wisconsin Supreme Court ruling in 2017, and adds options for flexibility in plan development.
Anything in regards to this is coming to the board at some point, right?
Correct. It would be for final approval of the board, but if we were going to, if something, an epidemic or
Yeah, there's
pandemic happened.
Great conversation's going to occur.
Correct.
I would've
There could be some planning around it, but then ultimately board approval to enact the plan. And
It's
there would
w-
most likely be board members on that team.
It's weird that a Supreme Court ruling from 2017 is driving it,
Correct.
not something from the most recent pandemic.
Yep. Yeah. It's like there was foresight of what was
Right.
going to happen.
This is not really related, but in a way it is, because if there is a pandemic and government overreach resurfaces, and we have to pivot to virtual learning, do we have a policy on virtual learning?
I believe the board, you did enact something. There's a virtual instruction policy, which would be something good to revisit again. Even thinking about,
Snow days.
correct. Yep.
Hmm.
Look at that in this post-school year.
Because why have a snow day? Okay, you have a snow day, but you're still learning.
We haven't utilized that. I think I've seen language to that effect, that we can institute online learning for that day or days. We just have chosen not.
Yeah, my message at the beginning of the year to community and staff was that, I think it was 4 years ago, we had prolonged cold days in the state. It was like 5 in a row. That would make sense after day one, knowing this is coming, we're going to pivot, but a random, unless we utilize it for instructional minute purpose, like for instance, this past snowy Friday, Cedarburg, Mequon, and Grafton called school. Their secondary, 6th through 12th grade, had Nicolay, the same, had virtual learning. Elementary
What's the
did not.
experience at that point?
I'm sorry?
I wonder what their experience was at that point. though.
I think it varies. With
Participation,
you log in, you get attendance
Yeah.
accreditation, so it's not loss of instructional hours, and then it's or instructional time for your DPI reporting, but then what's the quality of content that's
I guess
displayed?
to that point, like what you were saying, I think I see that for that long term, but when you have a one-off day, how do you gear up fast enough to make it effective or meaningful?
Yep.
My
Versus-
daughter did
Yeah.
that in Madison last week, when they had a snow day. Their instruction was only for 45 minutes. And they pushed out a communication before, and grade 1, all her kids were on for 45 minutes of instruction. So,
And that counts.
I guess.
They could call it part of a day.
I would think at a middle and high school level, the teacher could, if they had some way to stream a video session, could do some sort of lecture. But I don't know that every teacher has the equipment to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we get a consistent platform utilizing Google Classroom next year, we can build in those pieces K-12 through Google Meet and those type of things that may include that connection, but then we have to make sure that every child has
A device.
a device,
What
which
they
we're,
do, they do.
but we're not taking them home at elementary.
Oh, that's right.
So
No.
it might be an idea of we're going to do that
And-
6-12, right?
And just because they have a device doesn't necessarily mean they have internet access.
No, I know. Okay.
So things that to plan for.
And-
As I say, that's a developmental.
Yeah, my wife's district, they have Canvas as a learning management system, and they've been working for the last 5 years to make sure everything they're doing in the classroom replicates there. So the first snow day, they went to virtual instruction 5-12, and it was checking in, and there was minimal virtual streaming, but there was already coursework built out for those situations.
You know, we do a lot of, I oversee crisis management and business continuity in my company, and we do a lot of tabletop exercises in preparation for whatever, all hazards approach, specifically hurricanes, and we test. You know, with the Rockfield water incident that we had, how many days were we out? 2 days? 3 days, sir?
Amy Bell, we missed a day of
Or
school.
Amy Bell.
Rockfield happened during winter break, thank
Okay.
goodness.
You may want to have, as part of your continuity of operations plan, is to have a day where you flip the switch and everybody does virtual.
Mhm.
So that you test it, everybody's, you dust it off, the plan. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Because if we have another pandemic, we could shorten that learning curve, or snow days. Because if you're having a snow day, why not do virtual learning?
Sure. We have to build the infrastructure around it first.
So you're thinking a planned DR
Yeah.
type situation.
Exactly.
Our school calendar is going to have March 15th every year or whatever is going to be.
When you look at maybe
That
moving
virtual day.
forward with our state testing, and especially at the secondary level, high school level of pre-ACT and ACT, maybe you don't have all kids report on those test days and you stagger your testing, but then if you're home, it's virtual, so at least it's a trial with maybe a smaller control group. But something we need to build the infrastructure
cool.
consistently though across the
I get it.
district.
Cool.
I also wonder if you mentioned a district that did elementary had off, but 6 through 12 did instruction. Is there problems between the teachers that some teachers had to work that day and others got off,
Right.
and had to
And I
had
think,
no
and
work
I
to
think
do.
moving forward, even with snow days, we need to build some concrete expectations around.
Yeah.
It's not that technically you're still a paid day, but what is the professional responsibility of, salaried employees
As I say,
with
yeah.
attending meetings now maybe virtually, or being available for kids who are working on other homework or projects, and what that looks like.
Right. Is there an opportunity to maybe have in-service related content that you could switch to on an off day, on a snow day,
Sure.
that all teachers would get a certain block of in-service content, and then your next in-service day would become a planning day for them,
Sure.
or
It's a good idea.
something like that.
Yep,
So coming full circle, do we have a policy on virtual
I
learning?
believe we do. It's about probably revisit the guidelines of what
Right,
that.
because I would say you may want to include some language in there on continuity of operations, disaster recovery. The plan it'll be tested on an annual basis.
We have a policy about conduct in a virtual classroom.
So that would mean we're doing virtual learning, I would hope.
Well, what was that? That was the kid that showed the firearm?
That probably came out of the pandemic.
Yeah, item A is use or display of a weapon.
Yeah, that's right. You can't make this stuff up.
Right. Okay.
But I don't think we have a policy per se on virtual learning, on what that
Sure.
includes.
Sure.
So we may want to create one. Maybe Neola has something, a boilerplate that we can.
That's come out during or post-pandemic, yeah.
Right. Well, it's all to do with continuity of operations, business continuity. Whether it's pandemic related, water related, snow day.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is no specific changes to 8420.01, but
No.
future planning opportunities.
Yep.
Thing I gotta do.
Okay, the next one is 8450, control of casual contact communicable diseases.
Speaking of pandemics, right? So, revisions are made to this policy to more accurately reflect statutory requirements and authority granted to certain school staff and required action found in Wisconsin State Statute 252.21. This really talks about who has authority to send students home when it comes to suspected communicable disease.
My question on this is why would we provide teachers the ability to make that decision when we have school nurses and district building administrators? If we're talking about sending a student home in any other circumstance, the teacher wouldn't make that decision independently.
Yep, you caught an error there. I had asked Neola to strike teacher, and I didn't notice it was stricken. It will not. It should be school nurse, health room staff, because we do have a district nurse, but we have health room staff that,
Yeah.
play that role. Office staff, so if a health room person is there, a school secretary, that's common that they might say,
Cover.
you're not feeling well, I can see that, took your temp, I'm calling mom or dad,
Right.
and then obviously the principal.
And not to say the teachers aren't able to, I just would.
They
think
escalate. They escalate.
Or they're
If
in the middle
their
of
job
teaching a
is-
lesson, they're calling.
Their job is to get the child
To
to
the
the health room.
Right.
And let administration and the health providers take care of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should we expand on second paragraph, casual contact, communicable disease, seasonal influenza? I mean, why call out mumps, measles? Yeah, I get that.
I think that falls under what the Wisconsin Department of Health is calling casual contact communicable disease.
Well, casual contact, I could get seasonal influenza from Tom if he's sitting right there.
Sure.
Should we call that out? Or not? I'm just throwing that out there. Because if I see you hacking and coughing and you're a student in my classroom, I'm going to say, okay, Russ, why don't you go down to the nurse's office?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the nurse isn't going to check for influenza.
No, they're going to check
But
for
we're- nurses-
symptomatic.
Signs or symptoms.
Worse is also not going to check for measles
No, they're
or
not.
rubella or mumps.
I think they're saying these are communicable, defined as disease, where
I think there's legalese behind some
Yep.
of their terminology.
Yep.
Seasonal influenza is a virus, so, okay.
yeah, or allergies, yeah, could be hacking away, and that's
All right.
not a disease.
Cool.
Good as is.
Perfect.
With the striking
with
of
that
teacher.
Teacher,
and-
Right.
striking teacher.
Yeah.
Once again, not that they're not
Lovely.
capable. They just shouldn't have that.
It should be their
burden.
primary
Shouldn't be their
responsibility.
burden to
Yeah.
do that.
Should we add some language in here that the board, at the board's discretion, will not listen to knuckleheads who want to implement excessive government overreach?
Absolutely.
Would that just be a whole new policy?
The official
Bylaw.
term of knuckleheads, though.
Yeah. That's right.
Moving on,
Being
policy
recorded.
8600,
the
transportation.
Let me repeat that.
This policy is revised to incorporate regulatory language regarding placement of video and audio surveillance equipment in district-owned or contracted buses services. So this is to make sure that we are posting that whether we own district buses or with our contract with Right Way, that parents are notified that audio and visual recording is taking place. So that language would come in that, we would add that to,
We don't currently post that?
we,
thought we do.
I believe it's in our student handbook, but we would put it in our registration process as
Okay,
well.
sure.
So that, people sign off on the handbook, but at
Even
least,
though state law doesn't require.
yes.
I think we already have it. It's just making some
Yeah,
clarification.
yep, yeah, we're just an
Correct.
extra level of notification.
Okay. The next one is 8800,
So-
religious and patriotic ceremonies and observances.
So 8800 in the following policy, 8802. 8800 is taking the current policy and breaking it apart to make two separate policies. So 8800 is revised to reflect the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Kennedy versus Brederman School District, in which the court clarified the equal importance of and the interaction between the Constitution's two First Amendment clauses pertaining to religious rights. The Brederman case or decision reinforced employees' rights to the free exercise of religion, such that a First Amendment analysis regarding distraction, action, i.e. discipline or censorship, must consider whether the employee is exercising the staff member's free exercise right. Remember, I believe this was a football coach who took knee on the field. As a practical matter, the analysis remains unchanged. However, the court clarified that the school district officials were not entitled to err on the side of avoiding a violation of the established clause. The policy is also revised by removing the U.S. flag observance and placing those provisions in a separate policy, 8802, which we'll talk about in a minute. Revisions are recommended, and if not adopted, so that applicable policies articulate current law. A district can be exposed to constitutional challenge to the policy as facially invalid. Likewise, application of the concepts does require officials to apply the law as described in the policy revision.
Page 1 of 2, last, or the last full green paragraph. Nothing in this policy prohibits teaching about various religious blah blah blah. What about, because I've been very public on adding some, what do we call those groups? Are they affinity groups? What are they, those
Our
groups?
co-curricular groups,
Okay,
yeah.
co-curricular
clubs
groups.
and activities.
I think the group that I'd like to get in is from Slinger. They're doing a Slinger, Christian athletes, something about whatever. I would love to see that here. So saying that, is it possible to say nothing in this prohibits teaching of various blah, 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 or with adopted district course curriculum, or a school-sponsored co-curricular activity, or co-curricular affinity group, or whatever, what are those groups are called?
Co-curriculars and clubs. Yeah.
Co-curricular clubs.
Yeah.
If someone wants to bring a club in here, I want to make sure that they have that right to do that.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the way this was written was thinking the academic of,
Right.
school hour setting when it comes to, obviously in certain social studies courses, you're going to have the learning of religion. It's not to
Understand that.
convert, it's to say this is the historical.
But if we
presence of
want to have a club specific that's Christian based or whatever based,
Yep.
I want the kiddos and whoever that advisor is to have that right to do that.
Is there a problem with us paying an advisor with taxpayer money
Heck if I know.
to advise on a religious topic?
I think what they did up in Slinger, and I've got to research this, is that they have a community volunteer that is the advisor.
Yeah,
And
and it also comes down to,
But they're allowed to
you
have the
can,
club
you can
on-
advise or instruct on, but you can't demand participation in it. That, I think, is the difference. We can't teach a religion, right, to the students as the religion.
You could teach
But you
about
can,
religion.
you can instruct on many religions in regards to a curricular activity. You could advise on a religion in that same manner, I would think.
Yeah, but this would be outside of what you're talking about. This would be a group that is Christian focused, faith based, and more than likely we wouldn't have a paid advisor. It'd be a volunteer advising, whether it's a teacher that's advising on his or her own time, or a spiritual person from the community coming in doing that. I just want to create the opportunity that they can do it.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I think we can do that legally.
Without spelling it out here. I could go, if we
Or
move
is it
forward with
something that
this,
we
and
need
then
to-
it's
I
something I
think we
can
should add it. I
investigate
think we should put, you
with
talk about.
what Slinger's policy around that looks like.
Yeah, the paragraph here, as public employees, that starts with that, seems to not allow it to happen.
Yep.
As public employees, while on duty and acting within the scope of employment or pursuant to official duties, we'll pause there and comment for a second, such as a paid advisor,
Right.
district staff members shall not use prayer, religious readings, or religious symbols as a devotional exercise or an act of worship or celebration.
Well, I'm focusing on this next paragraph. Nothing in this policy prohibits teaching about various blah, 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 in a manner consistent with adopted district course curriculum and school-sponsored co-curricular clubs.
I mean, they're different paragraphs, but one leads to the next. And the first one states no public employees should do that.
Right. And is that based on the Supreme Court ruling?
I would assume.
The Kennedy versus Bremerton?
If we
My
just keep
understanding
it,
is the coach won that case.
He
Right?
did.
he did.
Because he had the right
So
to
that's
take
why
this
this
is
is- that's why
this
this
is
being
why this language is
revised.
confusing, right?
Right.
Because that's not true. But he wasn't forcing them to participate, which is how the crux of the case and how he won it. They were allowed to come if he wanted. If they wanted to, he didn't make that an obligation to be on the team. You have to participate in this. prayer.
Was this after the game?
I forget if it was
Yes,
pre or
yeah,
post.
believe
Either
that.
way,
If it was after a game, he could say, well, the game's over. It's outside of my official duties.
so the case was won on he didn't require participation in the prayer as a necessity to be on the team
Sure.
or status in the team. Just he did this and students joined him willingly, not forcefully. That was how he won his case, which is 100. I was really glad to see
So
that.
if we get staff that goes to the cafeteria and sits down with some students and says a prayer before a blessing before eating their food, they can do whatever they want to. I think that's allowed.
As long
under
as they're not
policy.
It's not
forced.
as long as they're saying you have to do this
Yeah.
based on
But
your
staff
not
can
class.
say a prayer.
Sure.
And if other students participate in that,
No, they can't if we leave this line in here. The line that Tom read, as in
as a
public
while on
employees.
the duty, okay.
And it's in the recommendation for a reason, but I don't know what that reason is.
But what's weird to me is they're saying they made this recommendation based off this case law set, but the case law, my understanding of it was he was okay doing what he did. And this is stating he wouldn't be okay doing what he did.
I would just say, just add after the second paragraph, nothing in this policy, after course curriculum, say with an adopted district course curriculum or a district-sponsored co-curricular club. And then, which creates the opportunity to have a club, and then you go back to the preceding paragraph, a public employee while on duty. So this is gonna, if you can't be a paid advisor, you can't do that.
Yeah,
And I
it'd
think
be-
all
it'd
the
be you
advisors-
mentioned a volunteer
Volunteer.
for Slinger.
But I think maybe that's how they get around it,
Right, I think it is.
that it's intentionally unpaid.
They have a pastor come in and lead the kids.
In the realm of all the other groups along this line, they start out unpaid for the first year.
Right. It's a pilot year.
And moving on from that year, they begin to be paid. Usually, my understanding from what I've seen.
Mhm.
So now we're saying one group can exist, but we can't pay the advisor, unlike the other groups.
Well, what's the policy on co-curricular clubs? Does it have to be a district employee as the advisor, or can the advisor be anyone in the community.
Yeah, I think we have advisors, just like we have coaches that are not employees of the district from a standpoint of being a teacher. Or
Right.
Usually they attempt to,
Correct, because they have a
Internally.
direct connection to kids.
I just want to create the opportunity to have a co-curricular club.
100% agree. How do we do it? How do we
if they
do
want to
it?
be faith-based, God bless them.
How do we do it and stay legal doing
Right.
it? That's my only concern.
What if,
But 100% of my support.
I think you put in that paragraph, nothing this policy prohibits, blank, 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 or district-approved co-curricular club. And if you want to get legal to opine on that, or Neola,
I would do that.
because right now, there's no way we can get that type of club in here if we have a policy like this.
Correct. Is this another one we have to hold off on?
Hmm?
Do we have to hold
Right,
off on
because we
this?
wouldn't be approving any new co-curriculars until the fall.
Yeah, I
So,
think we
mean,
put
have
it in
some
there.
time.
We put it in there.
No,
We could bring them back this spring still with the other two. that
there's
we
no
need to-
rush to update this.
No.
No.
So should we,
Exclude it for now?
And
which
then
means,
we'll
which
get-
would mean we'll have to exclude the following, the one below us, because it's splitting this into two policies.
Or else we'd have a contradicting policy.
Yeah. So 8800,
And 8802, we would bring back.
and 8802, because it's being split off from this one.
Right.
We should discuss it now anyways, though, to make sure that's how we like it.
Yeah, 8802.
8802, which would be next. But we'll be able to get that done. We just need to make sure the legal side of it happens.
All right. Are we done with 8800?
We are.
We'll get some clarity. Bring that back later. And then 8802 would be a new policy on
Pending that.
patriotic activities and observances.
This is similar to that language we're talking about. What I'm reading from this is it's providing us language that says we can do it, we just can't mandate participation in.
All right,
And that's
we
the
will
legal side
offer
of it.
the Pledge of Allegiance or national anthem, not
And we do.
just not require participation in.
As well as offering students a moment of silence for significant events.
So I think what I've read in 8802, I like. It's just pretty straightforward. So when it comes back, we just can't bring it now until we fix 8800. Okay.
All right. Anything else on any policies that we've discussed so far?
Oh my gosh.
So far, do you got more?
I don't. I do not have more.
I got another stack. I mean,
So I have a question on the policies. Can you walk me through how we got this chunk of?
so Neola's team reviews policies that are Neola in Neola's book, not policies that we've created on our own. And they have a rotation 2 times a year that they do with every district that's their client that has statutory requirements or changes in legal, Supreme Court, whatever it might be, and then they make those said recommendations or policies that are outdated, may have not had any legal recommendations, but they see that are outdated from a verbiage standpoint. You'll see sometimes when they say principle or you know, those type of things. That's how they run a court catalog and review, and then the same policies go before their customers. So any other policies, like the ones that were not in this
So we're
overview, were ones that I had flagged based on reviewing or conversations with board members.
Are we beholden to like a 2-time-a-year review that they provide?
That is how they do it. I would like to break this into a quarterly review.
I mean, we're contract. I mean, we pay this
Yep.
group
How much we pay?
40-some
four-
thousand.
Yeah, that's also to utilize board docs to house everything as well. And their legal service with policy. So The person we work directly with, he's new as well, so we're working through this together as a new
And
consultant. He wasn't
your-
the previous.
Your prior administrations,
This was all done internally.
you didn't have this.
No,
How
on
was-
prior districts, we had we used WSB's policy cycle
Yeah.
that would say these are policies. They send out a publication of policies to review, and then any policy that was 5 or years older would always be brought forward and recommendation of deletion, revision, or new
I
language.
think in the future, it'd be nice to get some input on what your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on this expenditure versus what we're getting versus your experiences of internally doing it.
And that then leads to, and we can talk later, but
Sorry.
that leads to utilizing your own local legal more.
No,
Right,
correct.
so there's that's what
that's what
yeah,
I'm saying.
cost benefit reward.
That whole-
but
we should have that
policy would be
discussion at some
done
point.
monthly. You might bring 1 or 2 versus at a board meeting versus I didn't have committees in other districts I worked in.
Yeah, if you think this is worthwhile, the money that we're paying, and you can go back to them and have them do a deeper dive on certain topics,
And we're using, like I said, we're
might be
using
worth
their,
it.
their legal.
Mhm.
not
Yeah,
our
that's a big
legal
thing, because
build
legal
out.
is not
That's-
cheap.
Correct.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, we're utilizing their legal policies are updated and reviewed by either Davis and Clutha or Rennie Lewis and Lacey.
Yeah.
For
yeah.
consistency with federal and state law, I mean, those are 2 big firms.
I'm sure it's their specialty.
They have just policy lawyers, yeah.
I thought we banned the use of that firm.
We use them, I inherited that we use them for special
Wasn't that the
education.
firm that
Well, we don't,
supported us on Liberty Mutual
Yeah.
litigation? And we desourced them.
so we don't use
We
them
don't use them
directly,
directly
but
as local
Neola
legal
uses
counsel.
them.
okay.
Neola uses
Got
them.
it, okay, got it.
All right. Anybody have a motion to send these to the board?
Yeah,
That'd be nice
yeah,
to-
I agree.
Okay. I can try.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve, move forward with the positive recommendation to the full board to approve the updates and modifications to district policies 100 through 9800 as discussed, excluding policies 5517, 5722, 8800, and 8802.
Second,
any discussion?
I think at the board meeting, I think we should comment on why we're excluding them, what they are, and what we're looking at doing.
57
5717 will still be brought forward
Will
to
be
have the
brought
discussion
forward.
with that language.
Oh, yeah,
The
yeah.
but it'll be
harassment one,
exposed to full.
Right, but
full
the
board.
other ones that we talked
the
about.
other 3.
5722, 8800, and 8802.
Cool.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Good meeting.
Anybody want to make a final motion? Bob, you want to make the last policy committee motion under
Yeah,
your,
'cause I have a little tear in my eye.
under your
Motion
realm?
adjourned.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Noting the tissue.
We are adjourned at
We're out of
6:52.
tissue, Sorry.
Thank you, everybody, and drive home safe.